Morning light poured through Liz's window. She could hear the terns at the river looking for their first meal of the day. As she rolled out of bed, she could smell her mother cooking downstairs. She rolled her eyes and went to her mirror. Her mother never really could cook, but it never stopped her from trying. Picking up her hairbrush and brushing her hair, she thought about her father. When he was alive, he did all the cooking and had taught her a love of preparing fine meals. Usually she got up earlier than her mother, but last night she had stayed up late in the evening drying and preparing the herbs and flowers she had picked to prepare for her trip to Cross. Once a month she had made a long journey to the capital to sell her medicinal herbs, a business passed down 3 generations in her household. Her mother was not much help in preparing the herbs either, and as the trip grew closer she had fallen behind in their work. To meet their quota, she would have to make one more trip to the forest to pick from the glade her father had planted many decades ago. The herbs only grew in the forest and nowhere else, no matter what the village people tried. The main reason the village existed was to farm and harvest these herbs. But as more advanced medicines had been developed by the scientists across the sea in Liqueur, the demand for herbs had waned. Sure, those medicines were cheaper, but to her mind the healing herbs of the forest were far superior in quality. The town had been steadily declining over the last few years, but she and her mother had managed to earn a modest living selling the herbs to vendors in Cross. That is, until the meteor hit. 8 months had passed since then, and business was booming as the world slowly turned more chaotic. The demand for medicines exported to other nations was so high that herbs were once again sought to meet that demand. The extra strain meant that she had been working twice as hard as she was this time last year, though she was still careful not to over-harvest the clearing. She was exhausted and had been trying to convince her mother to let her hire a few hands to help her at least prepare the herbs. But her mother would have none of that, insisting that they could get the work done. Liz washed her hands and face in a basin close to her dresser and dried them. There had been reports that monsters were sneaking into neighboring villages at night and ransacking their farmland. On her last trip north, as she passed through the neighboring town of Salt, headed to Cross, she had seen a lot of unsavory men gathering at the governor's office. She knew the governor, Alan, well, as they had grown up playing together in Arlia before the family moved north to Salt. She had kept a correspondence with Alan over the years and visited him in the city on many of her trips through, but recently his letters had stopped coming, and when she saw the men gathering at the governor's house, she decided not to pay him a visit on her last trip. Also, recent personal events made seeing Alan awkward. The world seemed like it was changing quickly, and not for the better. As Liz went down the stairs, she was already planning the rest of her day. Because she had stayed up and completed preparing the herbs to dry the night before, she could go straight to the forest this morning and collect more. She should have just enough time to prepare them for her trip to Cross. On her way out, Liz took some toast that her mother had burned and some jam. She declined the rest of breakfast, offering the excuse that she was running late from having overslept. Before her mother could protest, she was out the door and down the lane. Rounding the corner, she slowed her pace. Now out of sight of her door, she took in the crisp morning air and turned south to cross the bridge headed out of town. Her home was close to the south edge of the continent near the forest. The closest home was the mayor's residence, and the local carpenter Theodore lived across from them as well. The town was small and getting smaller by the year. Not long ago she had helped the mayor prepare a census for the King of Cross, and the little village was down to about 20 families. This meant a lot of empty houses, still owned by families who would visit from time to keep them up. But for most of the year, the town was incredibly quiet. Too quiet, Liz thought to herself. Running late today, she heard a familiar voice to her right. Mayor Regis was emerging from his own home. Regis was an elder of the village and the oldest person who lived there, well into his 90s, but still spry and able. He had taken to a cane about 5 years ago, but this had hardly slowed him down any. Since her father's death, she had often gone to his home when she and her mother were at odds, and to her he was like a grandfather. In his youth, he had been a knight of the King of Cross, and had fought in many battles and traveled most of the world. He was a fountain of wisdom and stories. The kind old man had settled here decades ago with an enchantress of runology. She had asked him a long time ago why the two great warriors and travelers had come here of all places to retire. Officially, he said that they came because at the end of their travels they looked for a quiet place to retire, but a few years ago he had told her the truth. His wife Edith had received a vision that a man of strange blue and black garb would appear in the forest with a sword of light, and that this chosen warrior would save the world from a great calamity. Once she reported the vision to the King of Cross, he gave them one final mission, to await this warrior in the town of Arlia. Edith had passed years ago, but Regis said he still clung to his mission as a knight of the king.